The NFC North might be the best division in football, and I think the Chicago Bears win it in 2025. I'll explain on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, The Legacy, Louis DiBiase. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the NFC North. I'm going to tell you why I think the Chicago Bears win the division this year, why I think the Detroit Lions take major steps back, and why J.J. McCarthy remains a mystery. Before we get into all of it, though, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first to listen, and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, Louis, jumping in to the NFC North here. And look, it's happened before. It's happening again. I'm buying into the Bears offseason. I see all of the improvements. Look, you add Ben Johnson, which, listen, one of the categories I like to do here with our divisional review is the best acquisition. Quite frankly, Ben Johnson is my best acquisition, so I might as well fold that into this conversation.
Fair.
The team that I think wins the division, again, is the Chicago Bears. I love what they did to fortify the interior of the offensive line. You get Joe Thuney, you go out and sign Drew Dahlman, make another trade as well. You just totally solidify the interior offensive line. Then you add more weapons. You add Colston Loveland. You add Luther Burden in the draft. You go out, you get Ben Johnson. I think the Bears had way more talent on their roster than what their record was last year anyway. So I think they were more of a 7-8 win team talent-wise. You add all of that stuff and then add the better coaching. I think the Bears can take a big leap this year. I have them winning 11, maybe 12 games. I think the Bears win the division.
Yeah, everything you said makes sense. And so I don't think it's a crazy take, especially with Ben Johnson coming in. Colson Loveland is talk about great acquisitions this offseason. I think he is really going to help Caleb Williams, get easier and faster completions this year. They were 4-2 at one point last year before the Jaden Daniels Hail Mary, but
ruined their season, yeah.
Yeah. Every time, though, I fall in love with a team on paper in the offseason like this that hasn't done it in a while, I always get burned, so I'm going to stick with the Detroit Lions. I think Chicago will compete for a playoff spot. I think they could be one of the best 7 teams in this conference for a lot of reasons that you laid out. But I just think, even though I'm concerned about Jared Goff losing Ben Johnson, I'm concerned about that pass rush. What is Aiden Hutchinson going to look like this year? Their roster, to me, though, is still just too good to not win the North, at least. I don't know if they're going to win a Super Bowl, but on both sides of the ball, I really like their young secondary, too. They have so many weapons. I'm still going to go with Detroit, but I don't totally disagree with your Chicago take. I like them a lot better than Minnesota, and if you told me they were better than Green Bay this year, I don't think you're crazy.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation and one that we'll definitely have, but Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears, he's been thinking about it and looking at, if the Bears were to hit their win over total, a lot of it does have to do with the other teams in the division.
You have 3 other NFC North teams winning 11-plus games again. That makes it a lot harder to hit your over on the over-under for 9 wins for the Bears. But if you have the Lions and Vikings both taking a step back and Green Bay remaining manageable, all of a sudden that opens the door for you to win more of those divisional games and put you over the top, even when some of your other non-division games on your schedule are tricky ones on the road that the Bears are facing. Should mention the Bears had some easy home opponents in there too, like the Giants and the Cleveland Browns, but teams that look easy on paper in April don't always turn out to be easy on paper in October and November. And teams that look great on paper in April don't always turn out to be great in November or December. So it's too early to go game by game and say Bears will beat them and lose to them and beat them and lose to them. But just sort of team construction wise, I think 9 wins is not too difficult for the Bears. And anything less than 8 should be a disappointment. But anything above 9 is probably going to be a little bit setting the bar a little too high and expecting Ben Johnson to work miracles. But let's start with slow, steady, incremental progress and taking a step forward from where they were last season. And then we can start talking NFC North and the big game, a couple of years down the line as we really see what this team can be capable of.
No, Lauren, I'm talking NFC North right now. All right, look, every single year, there are teams that go from last in their division to first in their division. Yep. Every single year. And if you look around the NFL, there aren't a lot of teams out there that make more sense than the Chicago Bears. Like, that is like the obvious one that you point to. Now, I will say, Louis, and this may be saying something about where we go after this.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick a team other than the Bears to win the NFC North, I would go with the Green Bay Packers. I am just more of a believer in the Packers roster, their coaching staff. I believe the Packers have built it kind of the more sustainable way, in my opinion, with their setup. And I'll talk more about that when we talk about Detroit and Green Bay later. I know we're talking Bears now, but if it wasn't the Bears, I would actually be going with the Packers because I just trust their system and what they're doing there, and I have less concerns in the other places. Why do you have the Lions over the Packers?
I think for right now, I don't know if I'm still sold on Jordan Love. I think a lot of this has to do with quarterback, and I know Jared Goff isn't really much better than those players. You could argue that Jordan Love is more of a franchise quarterback, as is Caleb Williams potential-wise and J.J. McCarthy. Goff might have the lowest ceiling of any of these quarterbacks, but I think you know what you're getting in him. And because the roster, I think it's more talented than any of these other teams in the division. But the Bears do have that fourth place schedule, and that's what you were talking about. Like the Commanders last year, they went from fourth to second, and they made the NFC Championship. So I wouldn't be shocked, but I think a lot of this has to do with quarterback for me, and I'm not still sold on who Caleb Williams or Jordan Love to a degree are. So I think they have potential still, and Jordan Love has shown a good amount as a starter. But I think for me, it's just like the combination of the completeness of the roster and the floor of Goff compared to the higher variance of these other teams.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that we're talking about this division as one of the best divisions in football, if not the best division in football. But the reality is right now there's so much uncertainty at the quarterback position. And we could say, whatever you want about Sam Darnold leaving, but go back a year ago and there was still uncertainty about the quarterback position. Just Jordan Love was coming off a better performance and a better finish to the year, the playoff run. But Jared Goff is the one constant. But Caleb Williams was a rookie. You didn't know what you were going to get from Sam Darnold at that time. Nobody thought that we were going to see the Sam Darnold season that we did. So, it's just the same exact kind of uncertainty as the year before. And all the quarterback talk, obviously, is interesting. What's most interesting about this division going forward. But I think what happens with the Lions this year, with some of the changes they've seen, that's really where I think we could get the most interesting development. And that's why we talk about a team that's going to have the biggest change in their amount of wins this year. I'm going with the Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center that can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. Stop just managing your money and start building wealth. For me, when I started using Monarch, I did not realize just how much money I was spending on online shopping. Now I know that I can budget smarter and I can save more and I can do it all without juggling multiple apps. It's all available with Monarch. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Once again, that's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, Louis, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL, talking about the NFC North. I think the Bears will win it. Louis sticking with the Lions, which brings us to the team I think that will have the biggest change in wins in 2025 in the division. And for me, it is going to be the Detroit Lions. I don't know what it is, but I just have this feeling that we're seeing a step back for the Lions. I have an inkling as to why I feel that way, and I'll break it down. But my guy Matt Derry from Locked On Lions, I don't think he's necessarily buying it.
I'm putting Green Bay behind the Lions. I'm not ready to crown Chicago as the second place champs. We know they're the offseason champs. They win the offseason every year. But I still like the Lions to win the division. When I go through this, I want to then kind of elaborate on why I think, despite the fact that I don't think the Lions are going to win 15 games again, and next Wednesday we're going to find out the exact schedule. But I think the Lions are going to be in good shape in the NFC. Look, we know how good Philadelphia is. They lost some guys, all right? They lost some guys, and it's always difficult to repeat. Tampa Bay, solid, always solid, seemingly winning that division every year. The Rams defense is pretty ferocious, and this is kind of the one last stand for Matthew Stafford type season. Washington, Chicago, and Seattle, we know how good the Commanders are. We saw it firsthand when they came into Ford Field and kind of pushed the Lions around a little bit. That's a very, very good team and a very good quarterback. Chicago and Seattle, whatever. Again, Lions road schedule next year, which includes games at Philly and at Washington. All the Lions are going to have at Baltimore. Tough road schedule this coming season at Kansas City. All right. Lions road schedule is brutal. With that being said, I like the Lions' chances in the NFC again.
Well, that's good. I mean, I feel like he mentioned all the reasons that we should be concerned, like the schedule. Look at their opponent list on the road. You know, obviously they have their division. They play Washington again. They play Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Kansas City, the Rams, all on the road. Like, I'm going to go as far as to say this, Louis. Not only will the Lions take a step back, I think that the Lions miss the playoffs. I do not believe that Dan Campbell is the coach that everyone thinks that he is without his coordinators. I believe that, as you saw in Philadelphia, losing both your coordinators when you have two NFL head coach level coordinators, losing both of them in the same offseason and trying to replace them is difficult. And I don't think that Dan Campbell is good enough to overcome that. Like, Dan Campbell is not a better coach than Nick Sirianni. People would tell you that, but where's the proof? You know, everybody loves Dan Campbell more, but where's the proof? And if Sirianni is a better head coach than Dan Campbell, he's won a Super Bowl, he's had more success. That's not really a hot take at this point. If Nick Sirianni's better, and even Nick Sirianni couldn't immediately get it right again, I'm not saying Dan Campbell can never get it right again, but I think that it's going to take more than a year to truly replace the talent that you had at coordinator. There are mistakes to be made and lessons to be learned. I think the Lions roster is good, but they have had some losses on the offensive line. They've gotten older in a few places. I think some of their players, they really expected to make big jumps. Like Jameson Williams, he's good, but he never made like the jump to, hey, we traded up to get you in the first round and to wait on you and all that. I don't know that they necessarily addressed the edge rusher position as well as they needed to in their pass rush. I just think the coaching losses combined with some of that other stuff, I see the Lions making the biggest change in wins. They won 15 games. I think they're going to win like 8 or 9 this year.
That's fair, and that's the thing. I don't totally disagree with you. I think they're going to win the division this year if all things go right and they do stay healthy, because, again, I think the roster is just too good to not win the division. But there's a couple things that could go wrong with the way their roster is set up. Like when you have you mentioned how it's hard to make up for the loss of good coordinators. I think it's even especially harder when you have the style of coach that the Lions or even the Eagles do. Like Dan Campbell does not call plays. Nick Sirianni is not guy runs the defense either. So it's even harder for those kind of coaches to replace them. So when you add that on top of, look at the 49ers last year. When they suffered injuries, Brock Purdy could not carry them. I don't think Jared Goff could either. So I think they're going to win the division if all things go right. But who would I want to be? Like, what situation would I want to be in of any of these teams in the division? I would probably take Green Bay or Chicago over Detroit. But I just think for this year, they'll still likely win it. But it's going to be close. I mean, again, last year, they had 3 teams that won double-digit games. So it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens with them.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that the Packers may stay, similarly to where they were. They're like 11-6.
I don't think Minnesota, there's another level for them to get to,
Yeah, Minnesota takes a step back from 14-3. That's not saying that they'll be a bad team. That's just logical. Detroit isn't winning 15 games again. That's not happening. So the division could be really, really good again, but the record of the team that wins it be much lower. Like 11-6 could win the division just because they beat up on each other. They all take a little bit of a step back. The Bears take a little bit of a step forward. Like 11 wins legitimately could win it. So I think that Detroit obviously takes a step back, but then I'll give them a couple more losses because I'm worried about the coaching there. Now, we have kind of hinted around the quarterbacks throughout. And I think it's really time to dive into that because outside of Jared Goff, there is so much intrigue. And that is why when I look at the player that will take the biggest leap this season in the division, for me, I'm going with Caleb Williams. I think that Caleb Williams got experience last year, and although he got beat up and it was a down year, he was getting very, very poor coaching. I mean, they fired an offensive coordinator in the middle of the season. Thomas Brown, I'm sorry, that's a good PR story, but Thomas Brown is not an NFL head coach, and I don't even think he's ready to be an NFL play caller yet. Did not set them up for success. They had multiple, very heart-heavy losses with the Hail Mary and then on Thanksgiving. A lot of that stuff can really mess with your psyche, and for better or worse, maybe you don't want this in a quarterback. Maybe this is a reason that people won't believe in Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams is emotionally affected by some of this stuff more than some other quarterbacks. You can see it. Either he's faking it to put on a show or he's really feeling as down as he looks. Either way, it's not good, okay? But he has so much talent, and if you improve the environment, if you give him not only not bad coaching, but really good coaching, then I think that he has the talent to really turn it around. And if Bryce Young can turn it around, Caleb Williams can turn it around. So I think Caleb Williams takes a huge leap, not from, to superstar status, but a lot of people are looking at Caleb Williams like a bust right now, and I think those conversations will be completely gone by the end of this season. He'll be a clear, we'll be talking about Caleb Williams like we talked about Jordan Love after his first season getting starting experience. So I just believe that Caleb Williams will turn into a good player.
Yeah, I'm with you by default. I think Caleb is the right pick. And I also am very curious. Stylistically, I love his ability to extend plays and the improv. I think that's something that made Caleb Williams special at Oklahoma and then USC. And even last year, there were times he had to elevate Chicago in that way because of how bad their offensive line was, the play calling, the weapons were, I think, underwhelming despite who was there on paper. So I am curious, though, if he'll be able to kind of nip that in the butt with how often he's just always trying to make the play running around like it's backyard football. I do think Ben Johnson is the right guy to help him, like I mentioned earlier. And Colson Lovell in that pick clearly had this in mind. Just get the ball out faster, easier, quick completions. Not every play. I covered Carson Wentz for a long time. And with guys like that, sometimes they just, when that habit, that's a strength of theirs, and then when they have to lean on that year after year, it becomes a habit that they just can't kick. And so I think the hero ball, though, has to die down a little bit this year. If Ben Johnson could get him to pick and choose his spots better, I do think he's going to be a really good quarterback at the next level.
I agree. It is about striking that balance. It's something that absolutely has to happen. But I think also what will help is, you want Caleb Williams to play in structure more often. But if the answers aren't there in structure because the offense is poorly coordinated, the play calling isn't great, the offensive line can't protect, if you can't win within structure because you're not set up to win, that will force you to do that more. So hopefully for Caleb Williams, he can find the balance because he absolutely will need, but hopefully he's in a situation where he has to put on the cape less often because the answers are there for him within structure, so it can go both ways. But more quarterbacks in this division to discuss. The player that I'm watching for, J.J. McCarthy. Also, we got to talk about Jordan Love too, man. All right, Louis, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. Talked about the Bears, the Lions, started nibbling at the quarterback conversation a little bit. I do think Caleb Williams takes the biggest jump, but two guys that could take a big jump in their own right, Jordan Love and J.J. McCarthy. And that's why when I start to look at my last two categories here, who is on the hot seat? And I like looking at the hot seat, not just coaches, that's normally what it's associated with, but anybody. And I'm going to say Jordan Love is on the hot seat. And maybe not in the way that, people would think. I'm not saying that Jordan Love's going to lose his job. I'm not saying that Jordan Love, is going to get traded or anything like that. I'm saying Jordan Love is on the hot seat to become an elite quarterback. if Jordan Love listen, he had 3 years on the bench to prepare. He should be more consistent than he is. He puts the ball in harm's way. We had a little bit of injury last year, and he was affected by the injury. I get the nerd argument that analytically, efficiency stats, like he looks goated. He looks like a top 10 quarterback, no doubt about it. If you look at the efficiency stats and stuff like that. But out on the field, he just isn't seeming to make the big play in the big moments. The Packers always seem to make the mistake in the big moments. And as the leader of the football team, your wide receivers are dropping the ball all the time. There's penalties. The Packers just always make these dumb mistakes because they're a young team. They need their leader to set the tone better, in my opinion, to not be the dumb team on the field. Super talented, but dumb, make the mistakes team. You can't be that. It starts with your leadership. If Jordan Love is going to be an elite quarterback, I think this year is the year where it's either we come out of the year saying, yeah, Jordan Love, top 10 quarterback, no doubts. He's in those conversations after the big four, like Jordan Love's in that next group that you have to talk about with Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts. He's either in that group or he's with, Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield. And which group are you going to be in, Jordan Love? So he's on the hot seat in my mind, not to lose his job, but for what his expectations are the rest of his career. This will be his 3rd year starting after 3 years sitting. Year 6, let's see it, bro. You're in your prime.
And normally, the year 2 jump is normally when it happens for a quarterback. Sometimes it's year 3 starting. That was Josh Allen. That was Jalen Hurts as well. But like you said, Jordan Love, this is his 3rd year starting. And
he regressed a little last year.
Yeah, he did. He definitely did. I think some of that was injuries, but you're right. Year 6 too, though. He did have time to learn behind Aaron Rodgers as well. So I think this is the make or break year. If he's not going to take that next step this year, normally quarterbacks don't do it in the 4th year starting or more. I think the Packers know that too, though, and they're trying to do everything they can to help him take that next step. We talked about, best offseason acquisitions earlier. You mentioned Ben Johnson for the Bears. I think getting Matthew Golden was huge for the Packers because they have a lot of really solid number 2s, number 3s at wide receiver, right? I like Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, and Romeo Doubs. Jaden Reed's a solid slot receiver, but they didn't have enough dynamic players at that position. I think Golden could really be crucial. For me, actually, I know he hasn't started yet, but I have J.J. McCarthy on the hot seat because when you look at it, feels very reminiscent to the Colts last year, the situation with Anthony Richardson, where the year before, they overachieved with a worse quarterback. Gardner Minshew almost helped them make the playoffs. It almost felt like, yes, they took the long-term objective approach with Richardson, but they were quicker to be impatient last year and benched him. I think because the year before, they got a taste for winning. And I wonder if the Vikings could be in a similar situation where if McCarthy's, the growing pains are there, because of last year winning 14 games with Sam Darnold, if they're willing to be as patient. They've taken that step of moving forward with McCarthy, not extending Darnold. But I'm curious. I feel like McCarthy's going to have to perform pretty quickly, and he's got a good situation to do it. But I think he's kind of on the hot seat right from the jump.
No, I 100% agree. And it's funny that, despite Minnesota coming out and saying, J.J. McCarthy's the guy and stuff like that, they have behind the scenes been interested. And my guy, Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers, who loves to make everybody's fans mad, talked about that recently.
We know the Minnesota Vikings problem. What is their quarterback going to do? They have spent an entire offseason batting their little eyelids at every veteran quarterback on the market. But then saying, oh, no, we believe in J.J. McCarthy. But we would consider Aaron Rodgers. We would consider Kirk Cousins. But we believe in J.J. McCarthy. We swear we believe in J.J. McCarthy. But is there anyone else that we could bring in veteran-wise? Joe Flacco, could you come in? Could we get somebody? Daniel Jones, can we do this? But they believe in J.J. McCarthy. They promise. They swear. Swearsies, realsies. They believe in J.J. McCarthy. Sure. That is an enormous question mark. The most important position in the sport. Maybe the most important position. No, let me be declarative about it. The most important position in sports. And we have no idea if that guy can play.
He has a gift of trolling, man. Just the way he delivers it is just so good.
So good.
So good.
But he's right, and that's why my final category, if Jordan Love is on the hot seat in a particular way, as I put it, the biggest remaining issue, it's funny, when we talked about the NFC East last week, I believe it was me and Luke Braun, we talked about the biggest remaining issue for the NFC East was the Cowboys wide receivers, and then they go trade for George Pickens. So watch out, J.J. McCarthy. I think J.J. McCarthy is clearly the biggest remaining issue because, like Peter said, we don't know if he can play. Louis, I know that we feel a little differently about this.
Yeah.
I don't like, just to go back, I don't think that Matthew Golden is a number one wide receiver. I think he's a good number two. So I don't think the Packers solved that issue with that. And I don't believe in J.J. McCarthy and didn't like him coming out of college. He was my QB6 in that class, and I thought he was a second rounder. So, I'm looking at it, and I'm like, you're right about what you're saying with the taste of winning. You saw Sam Darnold lead the Vikings to 14-3. So I think whereas the B version of J.J. McCarthy would have been fine if the Vikings went 10-7 last year. But since they went 14-3 and they're high on their own supply, if J.J. McCarthy gives them B-level quarterback play now, even though that's good for his first year of playing, Vikings fans will be like, that's not good enough because we just saw so much better and we're capable of so much better and this team's so good and you're not going to make us good enough, and they'll be more impatient. So I agree with exactly what you said earlier.
Especially if he's not making the easy plays, because although they don't have
Yes.
Sam Darnold still, Sam Howell is behind J.J. McCarthy right now.
Starting experience.
Sam Howell has starting experience. I think he is somebody that could thrive in a Kevin O'Connell offense. Sam Howell, I don't think is ever going to be a franchise quarterback, but if you put him in a system with a good play caller and the weapons that Minnesota has, I think you could do a lot worse. I think he's one of the best backup quarterbacks in football. It's why teams every year have interest in trading for him. So they don't have Darnold again waiting in the wings, but they have a guy that if McCarthy, I think they'll be patient, but if it's halfway through the year and they're under 500 and he's just, again, not making the easy plays and holding the system back, they have an option. They didn't totally burn the boats and have JJ be plan A, B, and C.
Yeah, I think that Sam Howell is the Sam Darnold of Baker Mayfield's.
That's fair.
He's not quite as gifted as Sam Darnold is. That's why he went 2 rounds earlier, but he's still a pretty good scrappy athlete for the quarterback position, I think. And I'm pretty sure if we go back to that year that Sam Howell started for Washington, he got sacked 74 times that year. It was a historic amount of sacks. And I'm sure some of that is his fault. Sacks aren't entirely on the offensive line. But when you have that many sacks, your offensive line is just absolutely terrible too. That's both things are going to be true at the same time once you get to that level. So if Sam Howell has a little bit of protection, why couldn't he be a poor man's version of what they had in Sam Darnold? And again, if J.J. McCarthy only gives you B-level play for J.J. McCarthy, what's going to be better? What's better there? And Vikings fans might get frustrated if they come out slow.
There's the 3 level of Pokemon, right? And I think it goes Sam Howell, Sam Darnold, then Baker Mayfield, right? That's level 3 of the Pokemon, if you will, for anyone that pays attention to that stuff. So yeah. I mean, I watched it firsthand in 2023. He battled with the Eagles in 2 shootouts early in the year. And again, Washington didn't have the support system for him, but it'll be interesting to monitor Minnesota. I think, again, that taste of winning, it reminds me a lot of what happened with the Colts last year. So we'll see.
Point. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great place to end it. Great point there by the Legacy. Absolutely wonderful. But thank you guys for checking out today's edition of Locked On NFL. Hope anybody had a happy Mother's Day as well, too. But that's going to do it for us today. I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, my co-host, the Legacy, Louis DiBiase. As I tell you every single episode, thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.